Siddhant, you had a question about how the finale kind of brings things full circle for Danny.
Yeah, when the show begins, and we may not realize it immediately, he's in a place where he wants to kill himself. There's no real nice way to put that. And he also says at some point that it's like the universe wanted him gone because he's trying to return the hibachi grills that he's trying to carbon monoxide poison himself with, but he can't. And so that obviously, like, understandably pisses him off. And when the series begins, he is at death's door, and he's in this place where he doesn't even know if he wants to live or what he has to live for. The finale also has him in a similar space where he thinks he's dying. The scenario, of having, like you said, lost everything and now, opening up to Amy, um he ends up in like a place of acceptance, not just of death, but of the life he has lived, of the person he is. It's kind of fascinating because it's not where most shows would go if they started off in the place that this one did, because he is still, at death's door. It's just that he has come to understand himself in a different way. And I was wondering, do you also feel like the show is in a way about accepting the nature of life so that you can eventually face death or accept death?
Yeah, did you see John Wick Chapter 4?
Yes.
I've been referencing John Wick a lot these days. I guess it is deeper than I thought it was. In John Wick Chapter 4, a character says this line. I don't believe this is a spoiler, but a character says this line: "Those who cling to death live, those who cling to life die." The idea is that in letting go of life, in letting go, and in this case, I think letting go of your expectations for life, in letting go of what you think life should be, in letting go of what you wish life was, only doing so can you truly live, I think, as opposed to clinging to life, which
Hmm.
then is a spiritual death of the kind that people experience in this show, right? Did that make sense? I
It
hope it made
does.
sense. Yeah. That's an example that's in play in episode, I think, 7 or 8, when Danny goes to meet Amy at her
Yeah.
house. And he says, "Hey, I heard you're happy. Everything's great now. I need to know if I need to get to where you are. Like, if you're happy, then I can get to where you are and I'll be happy." That's the logic, right?
Hmm.
And Amy does not have reassuring words to say to him about that.
Everything fades. Nothing lasts.
So I do think, per your original question, Siddhant, I do think it's about accepting the nature of life so that you can accept death. But when you say accepting the nature of life, it's like letting go of the preconceptions you have around life so that you can
Okay.
accept death, right? Like, and that and in finally accepting death, that can you finally truly be alive, which I do think is the state that the characters of the show achieve at the very end. When you look at the last shot, what is on your mind? Like, how do you interpret what is going on in the very final shot of the two of them being in the hospital bed?
I think to me it's a sort of physical manifestation of everything we've seen up until that point in the episode about these two people becoming one in a way. It's
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the show Evangelion? There is a concept about how what would happen if the walls between people broke down completely and we could all become one consciousness. And obviously that doesn't happen in a literal sense here, but I just think that is a
hmm
sweet little physical manifestation that, okay, this experience that these two characters had in this dreamlike state, in this psychedelic state, has carried over into quote unquote reality. I think it's, despite the fact that obviously Danny isn't doing too well, um, I think it's a really sweet ending. And whether or not there are emotional, excuse me, romantic connotations, I think I don't think it's worth saying that this is romantic or this isn't romantic. It is two people who have connected, spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, in a very fundamental way, in a way that they haven't been able to connect with anyone else. So regardless of whether or not it's romantic, I think it's incredibly meaningful.
What's
Hmm.
so great about the show is these two people start off hating each other, and what they end up realizing is they have more in common than they originally thought, right? Like
Yeah,
they
it's a enemies to lovers fanfic.
exactly. I mean the things they thought that divided them actually, like, even though they're from such different circumstances, there is more commonality than they think. I love movies and TV shows where two people are like rivals, but then they like eventually realize their shared connection, or that there's something that they have in common. You know what one of my favorite examples from this is?
The Rise of Skywalker.
This podcast is over, Siddhant. It's a movie that no one talks about, and I think very few people have seen, but it's called The Three Burials of Melquiades Estrada.
Okay.
It's one of the only, if not few, films that Tommy Lee Jones has directed. It has a similar dynamic within it, but yeah, I think it is really powerful to see these two people who, like, having had this hatred, are forced into a situation where they must connect with each other, and then at the end of the day, they can finally become closer, and realize that, you know, they actually not only have a lot in common, but actually care about each other. You know, that's really the beauty of the ending. I didn't pick up any romantic inclinations myself, but I did want to acknowledge it because I think it is something that is going to be a topic of conversation. But what you said is right. Regardless of whether it's romantic or not, there is a connection and there is caring there now, in a space where there wasn't before. So,
Yeah,
um,
and I think, when the show begins, and we don't see Amy initially, but it's a moment where, when she flips Danny off, it's a moment where she lets who she is slip out from her very
yeah,
controlled, affluent suburban image. She exposes a tiny bit of herself, and it leads to disaster throughout her life. And then, the series throughout touches on, like, how she is afraid to, be herself, afraid to, put that on display, and afraid to be vulnerable. Whereas the whole final episode is her finally finding a space and a scenario and a person in front of whom, she can be honest and vulnerable about who she is, and where both characters can acknowledge who they are in the process of acknowledging who the other person is. And I think, that again manifests in when you're not quite sure who is actually talking about who, you know because of, like, the drugs they're on. But I think it's a fascinating take on just these two characters' egos, where they are at the beginning of the show, and how much that breaks down and slips away by the end in this specific scenario.
hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.